So, hello everyone. We're going to start our review of marketing, and I'm going to probably bust this up into a couple of different lectures. Marketing is going to be a really important part of your final project, so it's important that you sort of pay attention to this, take notes on this, and there'll be a couple of different deliverables for the team that will come out of this marketing discussion. So, first question is, what is marketing? And when I ask that question to a lot of people, they begin to start talking to me about advertising, and they begin to start talking to me about selling, and yes, those things are involved, but they are not the core of marketing. What is the core of marketing is, and by the way, if you ask 10 marketing professors what marketing is, you're going to get probably 12 answers. And so my definition of marketing, something that will be on a quiz. Okay, so this will be on a quiz. Marketing is defined as satisfying a need while meeting your own goals. Now, that's an interesting definition because you notice it doesn't say anything about profit, doesn't say anything about sales. It's marketing at its core is looking at the marketplace and saying, what are the needs out there and how do I satisfy those needs while reaching what I'm trying to achieve? And it may help to sort of put the history of marketing into context here so you get more of a feeling for what that's all about. In the beginning, marketing was not even a discipline, right? Marketing, if you start looking at business all the way up through the middle of the 20th century, marketing was not considered its own discipline. It was considered part of economics. It was not considered in and of itself a discipline. So it's a relatively new discipline in the world of business. And then when it first started out, it was very product focused. And what do I mean by that? Well, in the beginning, you'd say, look, I'm a blacksmith and I like making horseshoes. I'm very good at making horseshoes. So you know what? I'm going to make some horseshoes. Well, the problem with that and the problem with approaching the world that way is what if you're a blacksmith who lives in Fairfield County in 2020? Well, there's not much of a market for horseshoes, right? Or worse, what about if you're a blacksmith who lives in Manhattan in 2020? You're just a curiosity to the tourists, but you're not really going to do very much. So what you have to do is make products that solve a problem that people want. The next step would be sales. And if we look at the history, we start out saying product, and then we'll start saying, well, I've got a warehouse full of crap, and I'm going to talk you into buying my crap. Well, that doesn't work out too well either, because how long does it take you to figure out that you didn't need any of this crap? Now, it probably takes you all of 10 minutes after you get home to realize, wow, I made a mistake. Now, will you ever buy from me again? Well, probably not. You'd probably look at me and say, there's that shyster who sold me this crap. And since most businesses, at least half of your customers are either repeat customers or referral customers, that cuts out about half the potential market. So probably not a good idea. As marketing matured, we took more of an approach of saying, what are the needs? Let us take that, look at that need, somehow or another develop a product or a solution for that need, and then identify that to these people. I'm not necessarily selling them into something they don't want. I'm not selling them crap because I have it. I'm selling them stuff that solves a problem that they have. Clayton Christensen from Harvard says, or who recently died from Harvard, said that people hire a product to solve a problem that they have. And another famous Harvard professor, Theodore Levitt, said people don't buy a quarter-inch drill, they buy the ability to make a quarter-inch hole. Which this is kind of an interesting idea, right? So you go into the hardware store and you say, I need a quarter-inch drill, and the guy at the hardware store says, well, I can sell you that quarter-inch drill, but I've got this laser here that's half the price and does a better job. Which one are you buying? Right? You're probably buying the laser. So that's the idea of marketing. Marketing looks at the marketplace, discovers those clusters of need, and then finds a way to satisfy the need. And it doesn't have to be with profit. I mean, if you look at, say, the Red Cross needs marketing, right? Why do they need marketing? Well, they need marketing, one, to attract people to donate to them and to share their time with them to help. But they also need marketing to identify that they're there to the people who actually have a need. So it's both money and service is what they're marketing. If you look at Mothers Against Drunk Driving, do they need marketing? Sure, they need marketing. They're trying to change the world, so they need to promote their message to the marketplace, to those people that are in most need of knowing about they shouldn't be drinking while driving. Does the Catholic Church need marketing? Of course it needs marketing. It has to identify those people that could benefit from the Word of God, which is just about everybody, right? So you need marketing, even in nonprofits. Okay, what is social marketing? Social marketing is sort of an extension. It's sort of like maybe a next generation of marketing, where you do well by doing good. And now, not everyone buys into this, and I think this is a little bit on the edge, but this is a concept sort of like what Patagonia does with the environment, or what Tom's Shoes does with shoes. So, Tom's Shoes is an example. So Tom's Shoes is, you buy a pair of shoes, they give a pair of shoes to a person in need. Which is great, right? And so you feel good about buying those shoes. Even if you think those shoes are ugly, you go, oh, well, I feel good about myself, though, because even those are ugly shoes, I help somebody, right? So, so social marketing is more of that, doing well by doing good. Now, these are for-profit companies. Patagonia, Tom's, they make money, but they have a broader issue. Okay. Next thing in this area that I'm going to talk about is marketing myopia. Now, and some of you guys, I've kind of already had some of these discussions with you, but Marketing Myopia was a book that was written by Theodore Levitt, or I shouldn't say a book, an article in a Harvard Business Review in the 1960s that was republished several times. And in his argument, he said, look, if we look at the world, if we look at the United States, and we look at the history of the United States, all of the automobile companies, all the airlines, all the trucking companies, all the delivery services should be owned by the railroads, which is kind of an interesting idea. Why does Levitt think that those should be owned by the railroads? Well, if we look back in history, I'm just going to pause this for a moment while I answer. So, why did Levitt think that they should own all those things? Well, if you look back at the turn of the 20th century, we're talking 1900, there were essentially no cars in the U.S., and there were no airplanes. The guys who had all the money and all the cool technology toys, the Elon Musk, the Mark Zuckerbergs, the Jack Dorseys of their day, were the railroad guys, right? They had tons of money and tons of cool toys. Now, if you ask them what business they were in, most of them would have said the railroad business, which is an interesting definition. However, if I was to ask you what business the railroad guys were in, you might more broadly define it as transportation. Now, here's the difference. If you are in the railroad business, you pick up your morning newspaper and you start reading about these two bicycle mechanics from Ohio who went down to the Carolinas and jumped off a sand dune with something made out of baling wire and tape and actually had the first powered manned flight. You go, holy crap, that's interesting. We need to move on, if you're in the railroad business. However, if you're in the transportation business, you look at that feat that was done by the Wright brothers and you'd say, oh my goodness, this is fantastic. And you'd run down to the Carolinas and say, guys, why are you funding this out of your bicycle shop? We'd be happy to fund you. In fact, why don't you join Union Pacific Railroad as the vice president of aeronautics? We'll take away all your risk. You'll make more money than you could ever imagine. It'll be great. And now they own the airplane. They would go to Detroit and they would say, Dodge Brothers, Ford, why are you guys banging heads with each other? Join us. We'll take away all the risk. We'll give you all the money that you could ever imagine, and you can just become the vice president of automotive for Union Pacific Railroad, right? At some point, antitrust would step in at this, but if you looked at the railroads in the 1960s and 70s in this country, they were dying, where they should have been this massive powerhouse. So, poorly defining what you are also prevents you from seeing business opportunities. Now, you can't be all things to all people, but let's say, for example, that your business that you guys were working on was doing bikes for around campus travel. You define yourself as being in the bike business. You're defining yourself improperly. You're in the alternative transportation business. So you could look at bikes, you could look at scooters, you could look at hoverboards, you could look at any kind of thing that could move people around campus. You might even get little, golf carts that drive people from place to place as like mini Ubers. Whatever it is, you would find a way to do it, right? Okay. So those are the important things I want you to think about when thinking about the history of marketing. Okay, now let's take a look at one of the most important things in marketing, and that is the 4 Ps. Now, just like in economics, 5 years after you guys graduate and someone asks you what you learned in economics, you'll say supply and demand, right? That's probably all you remember. 5 years after you graduate from a marketing course, if someone asks you what you learned, you're probably going to say the 4 Ps. So the 4 Ps are also known as the marketing mix. These are the elements that make up every marketing campaign. Not one is not better than the other. It's just you look at this and you say, what's the mix I need to have for this particular target audience to solve this particular problem? So you got product, price, place, and promotion. Now let's break these down because they may be a little different than what you assume. Okay, so if you look at the product, right? The product is more about the customer experience than anything physical. Yes, it's physical, but it's also service, and it's also the significance of owning this product. You own a Harley Davidson, and I tell you I'll replace it with this good little Japanese moped because it's better on gas and still gets you around town just as fast. It doesn't have the same significance as a Harley, right? A lot of people will only buy an Apple laptop, even though other laptops may function just as well, right? But they want an Apple. It's got that significance. And you could call that brand or whatever, but that's another issue we'll talk about in a minute. But the point is that it's all about the customer experience. The product itself is a combination of the physical and the service and whatever other attributes go with this product. So if you think about owning a luxury automobile, you go in to the dealer and how are you treated? Well, you're treated fantastic, right? You go in there and you say, I'm here for my first oil change, and they say, oh my goodness, it's so good to see you. Please take a seat. Oh, Bill, did you notice he's got a scuff on his shoe? Can you take care of that? Oh, and Mary, can you get this guy a cup of coffee while we're waiting for his loaner car? And by the way, sir, I know you only have a 3 Series BMW, but the only loaner cars we have today are 7 Series. I hope that's okay. Right? They treat you fantastic. Where if you get a cheap car, a really cheap car, you go in to turn the oil change, the guy barely looks up at you, right? And you ask him, is there a loaner car? He just grunts, busts 3 blocks down. It doesn't have that same level of experience. So it's not just the physical itself, but it's also the experience around it. All right. Next is price. Now, I like the Thoreauism here. Thoreau said the price of anything is the amount of life you exchange for it. So price is not one thing. You could say, I'm going to buy a bookshelf and I'm going to go to this nice furniture store and they're going to deliver it, they're going to set it up in my house, and they're going to take away any of the old crap that I have that I don't want anymore. That's a great, that's what I'm paying for. Or you could say, I'm going to get a bookshelf at IKEA, and that involves spending 4 hours of your time with a stupid little wrench trying to put this thing together, right? So it's about the amount of life, and it's not just a single number. Think about late night TV, right? And you're watching this late night TV, and they've got the Chia Pet, or they've got a Ginsu knife, or the George Foreman grill, and whatever they're selling, and they say, but wait, there's more. If you order now, only 3 easy payments of $19.95. Visa, MasterCard, American Express accepted. So, you heard 3 easy payments of $19.95, not $60, right? but they're packaging it. Think about the original cell phone plans, and don't tell me yours is different today, because I know it is, all right? But the original cell phone plans, you'd go in there and there'd be a price on the smartphone in, you know, the AT&T store, the Verizon store, the T-Mobile store, wherever it is that you're going, right? There'd be a number there and it'd say like $200. Was that phone really $200? No, that phone was more like $600 or $700, because what they were doing is making you sign a 3-year contract. And in that 3-year contract, if data cost $1 for whatever increment, they charged you 2 or 3 for that amount of data, because that way they're financing your phone. So, you know, you get your first apartment when you leave Sacred Heart, and you say to the landlord, I want 2 months free rent. You think the landlord's going to eat that money? No. What he's going to do is take those 2 months and spread the value of that rent across the rest of your contract. So he's just going to up the other 10 months on the contract. So it's packaging, right? It's packaging of a value exchange. That's what price is. I'm exchanging value in some way, whether it be time, whether it be money, whether it be immediate, whether it be over time, whether it's financed, whether it's straight up. Somehow or another, I'm packaging that exchange of value. Right. Next is place. Now, some professors would say that it's the 4 P's are not 4 P's, it's 3 P's and a D. And the question here is, how do you get the product from me as the manufacturer to the person who's actually using it? And there's tons of different ways, right? You might sell directly to the customer. Maybe you have an online website or a store that they come into. You might sell to a retailer who sells to the customer. You might sell to a wholesale distributor that sells to a dealer who then sells to a customer. So there's lots of different ways of getting it from you to the person that uses it, and that's what the D is. Okay. And then promotion. Now, promotion is a lot of different things. It can be advertising. It can be personal selling. It can be events. It can be premiums. Premiums are like when you get a coffee mug and it says, you know, Sacred Heart University on it, right? That would be a premium. Or if it says, you know, you get a T-shirt and it says Coca-Cola on it, that's a premium. Some people call them swag. Some people call them giveaways. Whatever you call it, that's just a way of communicating value. And then there's other ways of promoting the product. You can do, advertise public relations, which is, you know, where you're trying to leverage existing media without having to pay for it. So you provide a press kit to someone who is in the media and they write a great story about your product. So sponsorships, where you have like the Avon Breast Cancer Walk. So those are the elements: product, price, place, and promotion. Right. Let's talk about positioning. So if we're talking about positioning, we're saying this is how you sit relative to one of your competitors. So if we look at this sort of positioning chart here, let's imagine that this is quality on this axis and it's price on this axis here. So if we're looking at this and I say, where does FedEx sit in the overnight delivery world? Are they higher than average quality? Are they higher than average price? And so I'd say they're probably higher than average quality. They're probably higher than average price. So they're sitting somewhere over here, right, on this chart. Somewhere maybe just above that black question mark. Where does UPS sit? Probably about the same place, right? Where does DHL sit? Now, DHL is notorious, by the way, for trying to undercut UPS and FedEx in big customers. And because they're making that much less money, they have that much less to give good service. So they're notorious for being slightly less expensive, but also not quite as good. So maybe they're down here right where these things kind of meet. You know, where would the U.S. Postal Service be? Well, a lot of people would say their quality historically has been a little bit less than average, but their price is also less than average. So maybe they're over here by this little question mark here. This little dark, was it like red or brown? I'm not sure what that is. But so I guess it's a brownish color, at least on my screen. So let's talk about this. So you have a contract that needs to be signed in ink tomorrow in California, or you lose $1 million contract. Well, how do you get it there? Well, you're probably going to choose FedEx or UPS, right? Because it's worth, getting that contract, paying extra to get the contract there. What if your roommate this summer contacts you and says, you know that novel that you were reading, that old book that you were reading this fall? Do you think I could borrow that for the summer? How are you sending it to them? Are you sending it for the high-priced version? No, you're probably going to send, if it gets there, it gets there. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So maybe you send it, U.S. Postal Service. So there's a different, each one of these things serves a need in the market. And so you have to look at it and say, it may not be the highest quality, but it's also not the highest price. Or maybe I really want to spend extra for this because it's worth it for me to have this extra service, right? This extra guarantee. This is about a value proposition, and I think we've talked about this a little bit. But a value proposition is why your customer cares about you. What is it about your product or service that they think is fantastic? And so let's just kind of walk you through some of the steps of that, and we'll do this maybe more one-on-one. But the real thing here is about why do I care? Is it different from the competition? Is it difficult to copy? Is it part of the business model? Is it focused? So I'll leave this in the notes, and you can take a look at that. Here are some of the disciplines that are involved in marketing. You've got sales, which we kind of get, advertising, which we kind of get. Public relations is probably the most misunderstood. And I sort of talked about this a little bit just a few minutes ago, but it's probably the most misunderstood of these. Now, if I look at public relations, I think it's easier to kind of go back in time and think about this like in the 60s. So think of like the Mad Men era, if you ever watched that TV show. So 1967, you work for Ford, and Ford comes out with a new Mustang convertible. And you say, this is a great car. So what is your job relative to the Mustang convertible if you're in Ford public relations? Your job is to have lunch. That is your job. And what I mean by your job is to have lunch. Your job is to have lunch with the editor of Car and Driver magazine today, and tomorrow to have lunch with the editor of the New York Times automobile section, and the day after that to have lunch with the guy who's an editor of the Chicago Tribune. Your job is to have lunch with these guys, and while you're there, you provide them with something called a press kit. And when you're talking to them and telling them what a great car this is, you open up the press kit and you have photographs of the car. You've got engineering reports about why this is such a great car. You have a pre-written story that sort of outlines everything that would need to be in a good article about this car that they could have and use if they want, So you're doing everything you can to make their job easier to write a nice article about this car. In fact, you're even going to give them the keys to a Mustang convertible to drive around for the weekend. Now, is it worth this, right? Is it worth going through this effort? Why don't you just buy an ad in the Car and Driver magazine? Well, what's better, an ad or an article that looks like it's, written by someone who doesn't have any axe to grind? Someone who's impartial. So an impartial article, theory, or an ad. Well, the ad is being seen as an ad, and being very self-serving, where the article is just seen as this guy is an impartial critic, and he may or may not be. So it's much more powerful. Your other job in PR is to protect the brand in case of a disaster. Now, there's a couple of classic stories around this. Let's take probably the most classic is Tylenol. And if you haven't heard this, you probably will a couple of times in your academic career. So I think it was around 1982. Tylenol in Chicago is tampered with. Someone goes into a pharmacy, opens up a couple of bottles of Tylenol, and drops cyanide tablets inside. Cyanide tablets is a poison that kills you almost instantly. They dropped cyanide tablets into the bottles. So people died. People actually died. And so the Chicago police, the FBI, the Food and Drug Administration were talking with Johnson & Johnson, who owns the company that owns Tylenol, and said, well, if you take off this stuff off the market, we don't want you to do it anything more than the Chicago area because we don't want to create a panic. And Johnson & Johnson said, no, we're concerned that this could be a bigger problem. We're concerned about the health and welfare of our customers. And so it cost them, I think, over $20 million, but they pulled all of the Tylenol off of all of the shelves in the U.S. at retail. And they also made it known if you had Tylenol at home and you were uncomfortable with the Tylenol that you had, that you could send it back to them and they would give you a full refund of the retail price for that Tylenol. Well, like I said, tens of millions of dollars got spent. And a lot of people at the time who were, consumer products experts were saying there's no way that anybody's going to buy this product. You're going to kill people, right? How could you imagine? But what Tylenol did is every day they had a press conference, and every day they told people about what the police and the FBI had learned, what the status of the case was, and then they started doing things to sort of improve the safety. So this is when you started seeing those little silver seals on the top of the bottle, right, or the safety caps that like you can see whether or not it's been opened before. And that was when those were introduced by Tylenol. And so people began to take a look at this and say, wow, these guys are pretty serious, and they got attacked like the rest of us, and not their fault. And within months of them having this thing, they rolled back out their product with all these new features, and they became the number one selling pain medication in the United States overnight again. So contrast that with around the same time period, we had Perrier. You guys may be familiar with Perrier, the water company. And Perrier was the largest bottled water company in the United States in the 1980s. And then at some point, there was a rumor going around that there might be benzene contamination of Perrier. Now, if you don't know what benzene is a carcinogenic, so it causes cancer. It kills you slowly. So this is a pretty serious accusation. And Perrier kept denying it. Finally, the federal government stepped in, started examining the products, and then traced that there was actually benzene poisoning, and they traced it all the way back to a particular pump on one of their production lines in France at the source of the water. They pulled them off the market. It took a very long time for the federal government to allow them back in. And when they did come back, people didn't trust them because they pretty much lied to them the whole time. And they've never regained their position in the marketplace. And this is, 40 years later. So, good and bad, all right? Okay, product development. You would think that, R&D maybe does product development, engineers do product development, and they're certainly involved, right? But the problem is that engineers design products for other engineers. They fall in love with technology, and if you've got a family member who's an engineer, you probably recognize this in them. I've taught engineering classes at certain points in my career. I'm kind of a nerd, if you guys have already figured out. So I love technology too, but I'm also a marketing guy. And the thing about it is that engineers don't realize that they're developing stuff that only other engineers care about. Marketing people look at this and say, yeah, that's kind of cool, but nobody cares, right? This is what they care about. And the difference here is when you take a look at, like, say, the remote for your TV at home, it's got like 40 buttons on it. Which ones do you use? Power on, power off, channel up and down, maybe the input, right? Volume up and down. But there's like another 30 buttons on there that you don't use. And now an engineer would tell you why you needed every one of those buttons. Then look at the interface on the original iPod. That was designed by a marketing guy, because it's just you got one simple button. Once I show it to you once, that this is cool, this is all I need, boom, I'm done. It's totally different. So product development should involve marketing. Product management, you are sort of the internal entrepreneur for a product, and so your job is to find a way to do the 4 Ps around that product. Research, they look for the opportunities in the marketplace. Customer management, you try to get the most out of that customer. You want to keep them a long time. And if you're a grocery store, you want to make sure you get all the groceries that they're going to buy come through your store, that they don't go to you and then go to 3 other stores. You want to get as much of that grocery buy as you can from them. So you're managing the customer. If you're a bank, you want to make sure that you get not only their checking and savings account, but also their car loans and their credit cards and their mortgage and all the other financial products that they might want. Marketing strategy, of course, and then even the operational strategy. Because if you look at a company, a lot of what they're built around is dependent upon what the products are and how you're going to go to market. So if you're selling cheap bikes through Walmart, you have one set of organizational structures. If you're selling super high-end bikes to high-end bike shops that sell to guys who want to be Lance Armstrong on the weekend, you have a totally different infrastructure. And so that's kind of an important thing to think about. Okay. What are we doing on time here? All right. Let's take a look at sort of defining a market. Okay. How big is a market? How do we define a market? All right. So demographics might be one way of doing this. So demographics, I think we've probably seen this American Fact Finder site before. I'm pretty sure we did in class where I showed you, like Bridgeport versus Darien. This site is actually going away. There's another site which I'll spend some time maybe in a future video or when if we do a live thing, where I'll show you data.census.edu or quick facts. The census, U.S. Census Quick Fact, which is a new site that they have, which sort of takes us over. But the point being is what you're looking at here is you're trying to say, all right, let me move this over. You're trying to say, if I look at my product, who is buying my product? And let's just do. Okay, so this will do nicely. Open, link in a tab, view image. Okay, that'll do. Okay, so imagine you're taking a look at who buys iPads, right? And not who uses iPads, because I know there's 3-year-olds that use iPads and 99-year-olds who use iPads, but who's out there actually buying iPads? And I'm not saying everyone, right? I'm saying the fat part of the curve. So this is the spectrum of people who buy iPads. Maybe there's some 10-year-old out here who's some sort of whiz kid or some sort of trust fund baby, and he's got the $600 that you need to buy an iPad. And maybe over here you have my mother. My mother, by the way, is on her 3rd iPad, right? But you would not say, I know, I'm going to find a woman in her late 80s, and I'm going to try to talk her into buying an iPad, right? If you only had $1,000 to spend on your advertising, you're going to look to try to get in this part of that curve, And maybe you say people from, say, 25 to 55, right? That's where they fall in. And so I want people in that part of the curve because that increases the probability that those people might actually buy, right? Because they're part of that group. Now, just because you're 25 to 55 does not mean you're actually going to buy, right? I mean, what if you're Amish, right? You think that the iPad is the devil's work, right? Which is fine, right? You don't need to. No one's forcing you to. But the probability is increased because you're in that age group. You can narrow it further and say, I think there's a correlation between education and buying iPads. So if people have a higher level of education, that's going to increase their probability of buying an iPad. So if they're 35 years of age and they have a master's degree, they'd probably be interested in an iPad, right? Also income. People over a certain income might have a higher probability of wanting an iPad. So you're trying to define a space like that, right? You could do psychographic. Now, psychographic is when you're looking at people's lifestyle. So there's a company that's owned by Nielsen's called Claritas, and they do, let's see if we can do it this way. We'll come over here and we'll do, okay, good. Prism is part of Claritas. It's a product within Claritas. So is this giving us the identification? No, it just tells us that how they define it. Let's come back. I probably should have done this before starting the video, but let's see, is this it? No, it's not giving it to me. Okay, they'll sometimes what they'll do, we'll try one more thing. No, okay, it's not there. All right. What they'll do is they'll have profiles, and they'll say, maybe we have suburban squires, live in suburbia, are over the age of 60, have advanced degrees, were senior managers, drive a Lexus, eat at Bonefish Grill, watch women's tennis, and vacation in Aruba. Right? They might have another one, young Digerati, lives in urban area, has above average technology at home, has at least a bachelor's degree, is living in a trendy sort of neighborhood, eats at Popeye's Chicken, watches WWE, plays Xbox, right? And then they give you sort of this profile of these people, and you'd say, oh, that matches what I think is a good profile for this need. So it's not just age, it's sort of more how you live your lifestyle. You could get into analytics. Now, this would be sort of behaviors. So if I'm looking at how people behave, like when they go to a website, we'll take a look at web analytics. I may bring that up again later on, but we'll take a look at web analytics and say, okay, if I'm looking at people, well, we can do it now, how people would go to a website. So if I go to say, and it's taking its time. Yeah, I don't know why it's not coming up. There it is. Slow but sure. All right. So web analytics. This little piece of code that gets put on your website, and this is coming from a peer-reviewed journal that I am actually an editor for. As this slowly comes up, it will give me a profile of who's been on my site, how often, how long, if it populates for whatever reason. Oh no, wrong one. It's on the wrong site. Let's do that one. It'll give me insights as to, say, who's on my site, when did they come in, where did they come in from. So 20 users were on the site, they were in 26 different sessions. It shows me the traffic was coming from organic search, means some of them Googled me, some of them were referrals from another site, some of them just went directly to it. It tells me, traffic per day, tells me what time of day they're coming in, tells me what countries. For some reason, I've got a bunch of people coming in from Liechtenstein. I don't know why. Tells me that 96% came in on desktop computers, and that 3% came in on tablets, or mobile devices, I should say, and practically nobody came in on tablets. And this tells me where they went. I could see, if I've got sort of a more advanced, look further into these analytics, I can see this person came in, they went to this page and this page and this page. This is how long they lingered on things. This is the things they clicked on. So if you go to someplace like Amazon, they know where you were last time you were there, how many times you looked at a particular product, the kind of things you've been recently buying, and what you do when you're on the site. So I might look for people who have a certain pattern of behavior, and I might want to market directly to them. This is also why people give you those little cards for like coffee or sandwiches, buy 10 cups of coffee, get one free in a coffee shop. It's a behavior thing. Look at people's lifestyles, which is kind of like psychographics, but you could also look at their stage of life. You're just coming out of school, you got your first job, you're making some good money, maybe you buy yourself a sports car, right? But then you're out a couple of years, you meet that right person, you have 2.3 children, all of a sudden you're looking longingly at SUVs and, God forbid, maybe even a minivan. And you're saying things like, wow, wouldn't a car seat fit great in there? Right? And then you have that for a few years, and eventually your kids go off to school, go off to good college like Sacred Heart, and mom and dad go back out and buy another sports car because they hit that stage of life. You could have affinity. You buy the Harley Davidson because you want to be part of the Harley community, right? You want to be that bad boy who rides through small towns and scares people. So that's all part of how this, how you might break up a market. So what is a good segment? You want it to be sustainable. So, you want it to last for a while. You want it to be measurable. You want to know if people actually fit in. So if I say that you are athletic, what does that mean? What qualifies you as athletic? Does it mean that you once ran a mile? Does it mean that you go to the gym at 4 o'clock in the morning every day and work out for 2 hours? What does it mean that you're athletic? You want to make sure that people are accessible. You say that this group, I only want to sell to billionaires. Well, how easy is it to get to billionaires, right? I want them to be responsive, so I send them a message. I want them to actually respond and say, yeah, that's a great idea, or, oh, I'd love that offer. Thank you very much. And now the next thing we want to take a look at in markets is we want to look at how big are these segments? What's the total revenue that they're getting? Or what's the total number of unit sales? Or how frequently do people buy? Do you buy a diamond ring once, or do you buy a diamond ring every week? You buy a diamond ring once, but maybe you buy a 6-pack of beer every week. What's your average sale? Do you sell, is it $1? Is it $100? Is it $1,000? Right? So if you take a look at the average sale of an Apple store, that's a pretty heavy-duty number, right? It's going to be probably even like $600 to $1,000. You look at the average sale in a convenience store, it could be $5. Okay, what's the conversion rate? So of the people that you contact, how many of those people show interest? And of those people that show interest, how many of those people actually buy? That's what we call a conversion rate. What's your retention rate in your market? So they've been coming to me for years, or they came to me once and never came back again. And what's their lifetime value? So let's talk about this. So if we said, what's the lifetime value of a customer for Stu Leonard's? Say that you're a suburban household, a family of 4. Right? How much does a family of 4 spend a week in groceries? Round numbers, we'll say $200, right? How much of that is margin? How much of that does Stu Leonard's get to keep, because they have to pay for the product, right? So let's say that out of that there's a 10% margin. So that makes the math a little easier. So $200, 10% of 200 is 20. So $20 a week is what Stu Leonard's gets from you, right? How much of that do they make a year? So let's assume you take a 2-week vacation. So